Hello, Dorian, and thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, not a problem. It was such a joy to meet you at Hack Your Health and listen to your talk, and I'm excited for people to hear this again. So hopefully we'll have some people coming on soon. There is one. This is Lynn. She is true follower here. She's amazing. Real nice, sweet lady. But so, Dorian, to get us started, I know you have a nice presentation for us. So, before that, what got you started on keto and developing the Keto Mojo?
Mm. Well, that goes back to 2015. I was 2015. I was like over 210 pounds. I was spiraling through jobs. From having stable 8-9 years in a job, it was now getting lower and lower amount of time that was between jobs. I was on antidepressants, and things weren't going well. And a good friend of mine mentioned, you should give up the carbs and go on a ketogenic diet. And I'd seen my wife do almost every diet under the sun, and nothing had actually worked for weight loss. But then I started researching it online. I read the book by Dr. Stephen Finney and Dr. Jeffrey Volek, The Art Science of Low Carbohydrate Living. I started devouring everything I could get on YouTube from Westman and Taubes and Lustig and all of those kind of folks, and went on a well-regulated ketogenic diet. And back in those days, I was testing with an Abbott's meter. And over a period of 6 months, my weight just gently dropped off about, it's anywhere between 1 to 2 pounds per week, sometimes not as much. And I came off of all of the antidepressants, and I got this joie de vivre. I felt like I was 24 again and could take on the world, and I had never felt like that in such a long time. It was what was actually like a real sort of like a revelation, if you will. And I'm testing with the Abbott meter and strips. And, back in 2015, most people don't realize that strips were nearly $4 each, sometimes even $5. And that you are hunting on eBay and Amazon to try and find these strips because they were just so expensive. And so I took apart a strip and I looked at that and saying, like, why is this so expensive? So I drew up a list of 100 manufacturers. I cross-matched that to the federal regulations, what's known as the 510Ks. And the business plan was we needed to be able to test 3 times a day for less than the cost of a latte, was kind of like my phrase back there at that bit. And so when we launched back in 2017, the company, we launched at $1 a strip, and we guaranteed that price to people for life, that we would never ever charge them more than $1 a strip. And literally that changed pricing by over 75% overnight to make it far more affordable for people. And kind of like, I know affordable people look at the strip and go like, well, when we released our second generation meter, that was even 20% cheaper, and they're now roughly about 80 cents for ketones. I think if you're going on a ketogenic diet, you're going to be giving up that latte, aren't you? You're going to be giving up the cost of that. So why not test it and don't guess exactly where you are and get that instant biofeedback that the choices that you are making are working for you. And that helps you kind of like dial on in to a very personalized experience to what works for you, instead of like the one size fits all, and where people say, oh, just eat 20 grams of carbs, or, is that net, is that total, or just go carnivore. Here you can actually realize what works for you and the why. And I think people need to understand what is that why, that there are those people who are doing ketogenic diets just for weight loss. But then there are other people who might be doing it, like women who are trying to conceive, who've got polycystic ovarian syndrome, or it might be for somebody who's bipolar. And so the needs of those individuals vary, and the style of ketogenic diet will also vary to those individuals. And so
Right.
this is where personalized biofeedback becomes very key in creating outcomes for individuals.
Absolutely. I know I told you backstage I had gotten a Keto Mojo shortly after starting keto. In fact, you featured my story on your website, and thank you. But it was an eye opener because back then I was checking all the time, and it was like wow. And I know there's so many people don't chase the numbers, which I really don't. But to see every once in a while where I'm at now, because there's times where it's like, whoa, okay, I need to dial it in some more.
Yeah. Well, kind
But
of like
it's nice to have that without having to rely on a CGM or an individual meter, which I had one of those years ago. And when you talk about the price of test strips, my husband is a type 1 diabetic, and the price of his strips were outlandish. Now he's on an insulin pump, which thank goodness he only needs a very few of the strips. But there were times where, I mean, we're spending upwards of $400 or $500 for a month's supply of strips.
Yeah. Yeah.
Out of pocket. And it was like, whoa, that was insane.
So the key thing here is when we made it affordable, I kind of like think of the Keto Mojo meter, the GK Plus here in America, as a GPS for your body. So if you're going somewhere new, you need a GPS. But so if you're traveling into Italy, or maybe traveling for Italian food, or if you're traveling to South American food, you need a GPS to guide you. But you don't need a GPS to go to work. Once you know the route, once you know the way, and we as human beings are generally can be creatures of habit. When I'm not traveling and when I'm at home, I have the same kind of like very late morning brunchy breakfast that I'm very familiar with. And, I know that that's not going to kick me out of ketosis. So if I test and I'm always in ketosis, and if we've done our jobs correctly in educating people, then the need to test diminishes over time. And this becomes the important piece for most people. It's like, yes, there is that initial investment, but the need to test certainly diminishes. And quite frankly, it's interesting that you mentioned about a CGM. The need, I see a lot of fashionistas in the biohacking space and those sort of like things, and they're showing their CGMs and that they're tracking their glucose. But when I've worn one, it's the most boring thing, because if you are in nutritional ketosis, you will have good glucose control, period. And this is where the game really gets played. Obviously, for a type 1 diabetic, I think CGMs are an incredible, valuable tool.
Absolutely.
But as a type 1 will say, the CGM's only going to tell you one thing: whether or not you are bolusing sufficient insulin or you are producing sufficient insulin to manage your carbohydrate load. And that could be at 1 unit, 100 units, or 1,000 units. You can still, if you bolus that insulin, you can still achieve that line. It's only in nutritional ketosis that you actually give your pancreas a break, or you reduce down the amount of units of insulin as a type 1 is going to be used, that can give you that tight control and adjust from hypos and hypos. So I think the magic purely happens in ketosis, but I'm biased to a ketosis, and I think we'll go into that a little bit in the presentation.
Right. Just want to address a few of the people in the chat. There's Evelyn. There's Jennifer Lucas saying hello. Jeff Foltz. Jen Werner. Zana Taylor. I hope I said your name right. And she has been saying, she says, I've been wanting to get one, but the strip prices, whoa. And I think you just explained that, because in the beginning, you're going to want to use them and check it. As you've had it for a while, and as you're on this way of eating for a while, and you know where you're at, you don't feel that need to check as often.
Exactly. And that's why we individually wrapped the strips for this very reason. when they used to be in the tube, once you pop the tube, all of those strips inside will start degrading and aging out and only have about a 6 months lifestyle. But because we individually wrap them, it means that you're, the only one that's going to be aging is the one that you're going to use immediately. And then you get the full life of the expiration date, which I think is anywhere between 12 to 15 months on top of that. So that way, if you think of it being stretched over the top of over the time in that respect. But, 80 cents a day, like I said, test 3 times a day for less than the cost of a latte. If you're going to be giving up that latte that you are having or that frappuccino that you are having every morning, hey, this is very affordable, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper than a doctor in America.
I have to say, Dorian, I probably had strips longer than that, and they were still good. They were still working.
I can't say that because I'm not governed under FDA rules.
I'm sorry, but I can say that I'm not. Jerry, this is Jerry. She said, Cindy just hopped on. Sorry for being late. Question. Are you an affiliate? And that answer is no. And please, can the gentleman you have on now offer us a code today to order through you? I need to order more.
We weren't quite set up for that. But I might be able to call on one of my assistants to be able to create a code. We can do that. So yeah, I think we could easily set you up a code. I don't have it off the top of my head right now, but I'll try and figure out something whilst we're doing this presentation.
Yeah, just get in touch with me anytime. I love it. From the time I got it, it's like, okay, because it gives me a little information here that I wouldn't necessarily have, because I'm not going to go out and buy a CGM. Susie saying hi. Bought a Keto Mojo, and honestly, the readings for just glucose testing is way off from my normal meters. I have 2 different ones. I don't believe it's reliable. Well, I will say I had a regular meter, and then I'll get and the Keto Mojo, and I checked them both, and I would definitely go with the Keto Mojo readings before I would the other one, because it was a cheap meter.
I'd love to address that question, because I think that's an important.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good question to address. So if you think about testing blood with in the home, and you're using a meter, and you say, okay, I want to compare those 2 meters. What are you comparing them to? Your bias of what you think that should be, or do you actually have a bench? So when we went through our 510K, we had to correlate to a benchmark test, which was the YSI 2900 Stat Plus. Is a $50,000 machine. And we have to statistically hit within a certain piece of accuracy. So imagine you've got 2 archers lined up and both send an arrow down range. Who is the best archer? Well, without a target there, you're never going to know if you're trying to compare 2 people. So you actually need to know what the target is. Now, imagine both archers aim high. Well, you see the number will be the same. Imagine if both archers aim low. Well, you see a number, you'll see the same, you'll be happy. What if both archers get the bullseye? You'll be happy and be in the same. But what if one archer aimed high and the other archer is low? Who is the most accurate there? And you need to know what the bullseye is. So we compared our meter to four different ones. We actually did an independent study that was done on it. And we found that quite a few meters that is out there, especially those like the Abbott or the 406, they all aim low. And we aimed slightly above. We're higher, but we're closer to the bullseye statistically over hundreds of tests. And so some people don't like seeing that higher measurement, and they have this bias and they go like, well, it never correlates to. It's bad science to try and just take 3 or 4 meters and say, hey, they don't match up. What you want to do is like, well, who was closest to the actual bullseye? And we actually have that paper on our website for everybody to see, and I'm happy to share a link with that so that you could understand more. But our meters conform to ISO 15197 standard, which is the European standard, which has a greater degree of accuracy than the FDA standard. So the FDA allows you to be plus minus 20%. The ISO standard allows you to be plus minus 15%. And, we have to be 100% within that 15%, but I think somewhere in the ranges of 90% of the time, we're within about 10%, and somewhere around the regions of 80% of the time, I think it is, we're within 5%. So I would say to you, pick any meter, if it has glucose on it or conforms to the FDA, and choose that meter. Whether or not it's mine or whether or not it's somebody else's, just pick one. But comparing meters, you're always going to see this. Blood glucose measurements change extremely quickly. And even air is the enemy of blood, that change on that same blood measurement will change over time as well, even as coagulation is happening. So if you have to be very, very quick, very, very fast, and follow a protocol to even try and get them to correlate. So it's a really hard thing to do. So I say pick one. And as long as it's FDA certified, use that one, whether or not it's mine or somebody else's, because you'll know that you're within that statistical margin of error.
Right. She followed it up. She said, I've been using meters for 40 years, as well as I took to a doctor's office to compare with theirs as well. 3 meters came out plus or minus 4 point difference. Keto Mojo was 20 points off.
I can say that our product is in use in over 89 clinical trials. And I can also say that the #1 type 2 diabetes company in America, which is Virta Health, they actually use our meter as well. Your experience may vary, and that's the only piece that I can say that is on that piece. But Becca, I appreciate your feedback.
Yes. Okay, Jen says I have a CGM that my insurance covers. Evelyn loves her Keto Mojo. I do too. Jerry says, please, to her request. That's about the discount code and stuff. Well, Keto Mojo, thank you very much. So I appreciate the affiliate code you can give to support you and Cindy too, Dorian. Thank you. I have a Freestyle Libre 3. And then Becca says, and for me, 20 points off is a lot. It is. They were all 4 tested at the same time with the same blood.
We're talking glucose measurements here, I presume, Becca. We're not talking ketones. Mm-hmm. So, my discussion today is ketones. I mean, I don't actually even use a CGM, and really, I don't really worry too much about my glucose readings. Because I'm focused on being in nutritional ketosis, because if you are in nutritional ketosis, you do have good glucose control. And so here's the key. The question is which road do you want to look at? Do you want to look at the glucose road? Now, we can all see that if we get an excursion from maybe sweet potato or from rice, is that the right road to be looking at? Or do you want to be looking at the ketosis world, and that's where it needs to be. But thank you, Becky, for coming on in. I mean, obviously,
absolutely,
it's appreciated for your question.
Robin says, "Hey, Keto Mojo and Cindy." His name is Dorian. They have a Foracare, and we're going to get to your presentation. The glucose off that much, then the ketones are not correct. I find the only thing that raises my blood sugar is keto chow, and my 2-hour postprandial is 80 to 90.
Well, Becca, I'd like to come back to Becca again a little bit here, because obviously, here's the thing for you, Becca. We are the only meter in the world that offers a lifetime guarantee. I would say to you, let's do a control that's on it. We're the only company that actually has a control solution that's in there. I do not know how long that it is and what's going on with that. And then you can work with our customer service, and we would happily replace that meter if it is not working. There is no other company that is in that respect. And I think this is one of the key things, that our customer service is excellent in that respect. And Becca, your experience is not what we're seeing from all of the thousands and thousands of people that we take care of every day. Yours is not the experience that we're seeing in the 89 clinical trials. And yours is not the experience that we are seeing with Virta Health, who have got their $2 billion valuation and rely on us to provide them with great, accurate stuff. So my thing to you is, please get in contact with the customer service, and we stand by our lifetime guarantee on our product.
Yeah. So she says here, she was wondering if she had gotten a bad meter.
Our manufacturing defect rate is 0.007. That's a lot of zeros to it.
That's pretty good.
And to be clear, in manufacturing, that's really hard to do because obviously we are held to the ISO 15197 standard when it comes to manufacturing. I'm not saying that things don't happen. I'm not saying that an error can be made on the line or that things can get dropped and can go out of alignment. But that is the way that that we can see it. So I said, definitely support@ketomojo.com. If you send them an email, they usually reply during business hours in under 10 minutes.
All righty. And that's amazing. All right, one more. Jerry, Cindy, do you remember when Wendy got her Keto Mojo replaced a while ago? Keto Mojo came through as promised. Of course, I do remember that. Wendy and Harry from Loving It on Keto were testing on their live streams every day. And she would test on her machine, and Harry had his own machine. She would test on Harry's, and it would be way different. So she got in touch with Keto Mojo, and they sent her a new one, and now they're right dead even with each other, and
there we go.
That's the way it is. All right. Dorian has a presentation for us. I'm going to bring that up, share the screen, and he's going to go through that with us.
So yeah, Cindy, you first saw this at Hack Your Health conference in Austin, Texas. And so what we're going to do is kind of like going to be taking you through glucosis versus ketosis and how we can regard this as a path to both metabolic and mental health. Mental health. So first, I kind of want to start a little bit with what I call the ABCs. Acknowledge bias. I stand before you, I'm biased. But I think it's also in ourselves, we have to acknowledge bias internally. And what I mean by that, when it comes to food politic, when it comes to discussing food, we all have a bias. And that could be a bias from the accident of where we were born in the world. Say you were born into a Jewish family and they kept a kosher kitchen. The foods that you would be biased based on your religion and the accident of your birth. You could be biased because if you were brought up in China eating Chinese and Sichuan food, same with Italy and the same with the South. You can be biased because of a perceived perception of ethics that you don't want to eat animals or in that respect. And it's important when ideas are presented that we can acknowledge our own internal bias and not just of the person who's presenting the information to them. And so once you are able to acknowledge that bias, you can be curious. You can say like, hey, is this right? And have that curiosity to go in a little bit more in depth. And then in return for that, do conscientious research yourself. Don't just take it as it coming from me as being gospel in any way, shape or form. I think you should do your research and understand that as evidence gets presented and look at evidence-based decision-making to actually kind of like guide you, because we at our core always utilize evidence-based when we are presenting any ideas or formulations or any information that we have on our website. And we have over 2.8 million visitors to our website every year. And that's new users. And this is for people and so the quality of the information that we give away for free is extremely beneficial, but all of it is peer reviewed with our own, with our team to make sure that everything we present is actually rooted in science and is not sort of like dogma. So I think we did do a little bit of the background. You can see that's my fat picture, my before and after on that one there. The after picture actually is going to be my obituary picture, because you don't want to see a sad, gray-faced old gentleman up there. I want people to know that at one time I did have a set of abs and was a reasonably looking human being in that respect. Obviously, I'm the founder of Keto Mojo, and I'm also the chairman and founder of the Ketogenic Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit public charity where we fund clinical trials and studies and education into the efficacy and use of ketogenic therapies for the benefit of humankind. And I'm also on advisory board member for the Keto Life Center, which is based in Switzerland. And I also am advisory committee for the Metabolic Training Institute Health, which is specializes in utilizing ketogenic diets as an adjuvant for cancer treatments. So, I mean, obviously with all of these, I'm extremely biased. And so I think once we acknowledge our bias of what I'm speaking, I've been in nutritional ketosis since 2015, and I personally wouldn't move out from it. I think this is actually the default status for human beings, and I think I'm going to try and make a case for that as we go through this presentation. So glucosis versus ketosis. I think first we need to kind of like take what I mean by glucosis, or what we mean by glucosis in that state, which is that metabolic fed state that occurs when you're primarily utilizing glucose for energy. And glucose, those sources are coming from your diet, from your glycogen stores, and from glucose neogenesis within your liver. So if you are eating carbohydrates, you will be in a state of glucosis. You will not be in a state of ketosis. However, if you're in ketosis, which we'll get into, you can start to be a bit flex feeding. So basically what happens when you're consuming carbs, those carbs, the complex carbs, are broken down into simple sugars. They're then absorbed into the bloodstream as glucose, and then your body has to deal with this glucose that comes on in. So as it deals with that, insulin is secreted to manage that glucose, and that glucose then goes in either as being used as fuel instantly at that moment, put into your glycogen stores for use later, and there's about 2,000 kilocalories that you can put into your glycogen, or it gets stored as fat. Oh, I went the wrong way there. So you can kind of like see a little bit, I'm not too sure if you can see my little pointer here. It's tiny, but I'll try and talk it through because that's not going to come through. So what happens is glucose goes up, and you can see that peak where you've got that little red spike that's on there. Insulin needs to be pushed out of that one there. That then brings the blood glucose down on like that one. So that kind of like you get that glucose crash afterwards, and that piece. And then you kind of get back onto that roller coaster. And that movement repeats itself on somebody who's mainly in glucosis many times a day, especially now people who are eating carbs are probably having 6 servings of carbs per day as they go on through in that respect. So here you've got high insulin levels, so access to stored fat is inhibited. You're not producing any ketones or getting any of the benefits that ketones do, because ketones are more than just a fuel source. And then the brain is dependent on glucose for energy. And I just want to touch here on this bit about brain being dependent on glucose for energy. Well, what basically happening here is every single cell in your body is dependent on glucose for energy if you're only eating carbohydrates. And what I mean by that, you're brute forcing every single cell in your body to say, I'm only giving you glucose. Now, if you're in a state of nutritional ketosis, you now have ketones. And remember, there are 3 different types of ketones. You've got acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and acetone. So now you've got 3 more energy substrates on top of that base glucose substrate, because even while in nutritional ketosis, you will produce all the glucose that your body needs through glucose neogenesis. So you're still getting all the glucose you need, plus you're getting all these other things that kind of really come into play. And this is the true magic of where nutritional ketosis can make the difference, because then you're allowing your cells to say, I choose the best substrate that I want to use. Sure, you're basically giving your body this buffet of energy substrates in which to actually utilize. And this is where we see the benefits of your heart performing better, brain function performing better, and your brain actually prefers ketones over glucose. It will actually spare that glucose in favor of ketones. So sugar equals glucose plus fructose. So you can see the glucose molecule there, and you at the bottom, and you can see the fructose in pink. So when we eat sugar, we will break that sugar into 2 parts, glucose and fructose, that goes on into play in there. Starch, complex, breads, croissants, pastas, sourdough breads, ancient grains of the Aztecs, Peruvian blue potatoes, doesn't matter how you mix that up. These are long chains of glucose. So you can kind of like look at these as simply glucose holding hands. If you think of like sourdough bread or organic bread or anything like that, it's simply long string polars of glucose holding hands. And your body will break that down into glucose. And so really you have to kind of like think the difference between glucose and sugar and starch is like, I think, like two trains. Sugar is the high speed train. Complex carbs is the low speed freight train. But either way, you're on the tracks. And either way, both of those things are going to hit you. The question is, can you get off those tracks so you don't have to worry about those freight trains that are hitting you? So if I'm in a state of nutritional ketosis, I have very stable glucose levels. So I don't even worry about a glucose level in my mind for being on a well-regulated ketogenic diet. The time that I would be more concerned about my blood glucose levels is A, when I'm first starting. B, if I'm doing a cancer treatment, I'm really trying to push down on that glucose level so I can get my GKI up, and we'll come back to that GKI bit in a little bit here. But really, if you are in a state of nutritional ketosis, you will have good, stable blood glucose. And in this state of nutritional ketosis, your insulin levels are low, you get access to your stored fat, your liver produces that fuel mix that I mentioned of glucose and ketones. And now you've got the optimal energy supply for the brain. So this is how, where ketogenic diets for bipolar, anxiety, depression, and schizophrenia, this new supply of energy subjects to the brain is what's kind of like making the big kind of like one of the main big difference that's being used there, because now we're giving that optimal energy for the body. So in a state of glucosis, you've got erratic blood sugar, hypers and hypos. But in a ketogenic diet, you have stable, consistent blood glucose. And you can get this stable in the absence of all food. I think one of the great studies that I saw was the 0500 by Dr. Ian Lake. And he had zero food for 5 days and ran 100 miles. It was actually a group of them were doing it. And Dr. Ian Lake is a GP in England, and he's also a type 1 diabetic. And he showed that you could fuel yourself in an absence of any food politic here. All he had was ketones for energy. So he could clearly show that it wasn't this type of potato or this type of yam or this type of thing. It was in the absence of everything here with the substrates of being used, and he could achieve really great stable blood ketones and glucose. But ketones are more than just a fuel. And I think this is what a lot of people don't realize, that they have a huge amount of hormonal properties and act as a signaling molecule actually in the body, which can affect your gene expression, inflammation, and on your metabolism. Like hormones, that they are transported in the bloodstream. What's really interesting is ketones are really stable within the body. Glucose is not. If you think about it, your body has to manage glucose just as much as your body has to manage alcohol. Otherwise, it's going to have a problem. We see this in type 1s. If you don't bring that glucose down, we're going to have a problem within that body. So you must have this insulin secretion to deal with it. The same thing that happens with alcohol. Your body's going to deal with that neurotoxin and has to bring that down. And bear in mind that alcohol is also a fuel source for the body. It is possible to live on alcohol alone, but I don't think that's going to be a good dietary choice for somebody. We can see the bad effects of that. We can also see the bad effects of what happens with carbohydrate consumption. We can see the obesity epidemic, the healthcare epidemic that we're seeing, the cancer epidemic that we're seeing. You see all of these non-communicable diseases, these NCDs, are causing problems, and yet we can fix a lot of these problems with a well-regulated ketogenic diet. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what is the true substrate? It has a regulatory effect on the body by enabling to metabolize your bodily fat. You get greater satiety from a ketogenic diet with that feedback of that ghrelin hormone that comes in, and it can have massive effects of physiological and psychological functions on the body. So ketones are much more than just a fuel substrate. They do so much. They're a force multiplier. So a little thing of, let's talk about switching on to the effects of glucosis and what that kind of like has on the body when you're primarily utilizing glucose for energy. I mean, I think all of you people by now have seen that the food diagram or the MyGov plate everywhere that's suggesting that the base load is of these massive 6 to 11 servings a day. And, you know, what has this mean? I mean, if we look at the MyGov plate, and I don't know if you guys can actually see it on this thing, in America, fresh vegetables from 1970 to 2014, the consumption of fresh vegetables is up by 20%. Fresh fruit is up by 35%. Grains is up by 28%. And vegetable oils are up by 87%. Meanwhile, during that same period of time, red meat is down 28%, whole milk down 79%, eggs down 13%, animal fats down by 27%, butter down by 9%. So in this time, we've done everything that the government has asked us. We are eating to the MyGov plate on a population scale. And what are the results that we've had? The results are plainly evident that now we have NCDs, non-communicable that are overburdening our healthcare system. In America, our healthcare costs have been spiraling massively. There's the same effect as our obesity has gone up significantly, and all these other NCDs have gone up. So the great experiment that you could ever see on a population scale has played out, and it's not working. And this is the key that everybody needs to remember. For the first time in American history, the next generation has less of a life expectancy than what has gone on before. And this is driven by the fact of this obesity epidemic that we have in society, eating to the MyGov plate. So I think we need to kind of like take a step back and say, perhaps this hasn't worked. So how did we get here? How do we get to this point? Well, on this map, it's been the globalization of food. 450 years ago, people in the European Union would have never had a potato. They would have never experienced peppers. They would not have had tomato sauce. All these great Italian cuisine with these beautiful tomato sauces did not exist in Italy 450 years ago. It was only the globalization through sale that we started seeing different vegetables and different pieces go to different areas of the country. And if we go back further than the 450 years to Mesopotamia, which is known as the breadbasket, the cradle of civilization, so to speak, not many people know that in Mesopotamia back then, that there was once a massive pine forest that went across there that had lions and tigers and hippos. And basically what we did is we ate all the animals and we cut down all the trees and we created the first ecological disaster. And when you have this area where like, oh my gosh, what am I going to eat? And you're left in a subsistence mode where you're trying to have to pick out seeds because this is the only thing that you can find. What they realized was, yes, that they could use glucose as a substrate. They could use carbohydrates as a substrate. And obviously this is before the advent of the refrigerator. So now you had a shelf-stable food that you could store for a while. And we became very good at farming. But if you consider on the hunter-gatherer level, it's much easier and quicker to take down an animal than it is to harvest seeds, clear an area of land, plow that area, put those seeds in, pray for rain, keep all the pests out, get it to a full harvest, harvest it in, grind it down, and package it. Here is that first ever processed food that came into play on that part there. Whereas you could take a simple bow and now you can eat yourself an animal. So for the majority of our existence, we weren't actually eating like the way we were eating like that. And I kind of like, I know correlation is not causation. The first mention of diabetes systems was in 1552 BC by the Egyptian physician Hesi-Ra. So here we have the first recorded bit that we know about that in the breadbasket for diabetes mellitus, which I think is quite a funny thing. And so the question we must ask ourselves is this the optimal food substrate for us as humans? Is this the best way that we should be expressing our humanity? And, you know, did we have a better way, but we kind of like lost it along the way? And now just because we think it's traditional, we think it's good, it might not actually be good for us. And we kind of like have seen this play on out with different types of cuisines. We're seeing especially in Europe and in America with these rising obesity rates, that what we think is the right way might actually be the wrong way. So here is the timeline for this. It's only in these last few months have we seen this massive rise that kind of like comes on in to how that carbohydrate timeline has kind of like affected us. So does sugar affect the brain? Cindy, do you think that sugar affects the brain, that sugar can be quite impactful? I mean, that's your brain on cocaine. That's your brain on sugar. It's lighting up those dopamine centers that can let there. Sugar can be extremely impactful. Extremely impactful. How many people have gone to a children's party and the cakes all come on out and they kind of like see all the children going a little bit, I wouldn't say crazy, but they become hyperactive and all of these kind of like things. And you can see there immediately the impact of sugar. Remember, sugar is glucose plus fructose, but they get broken down. So its base component is glucose. This is important. The base bit is glucose. If we can see that happen at a children's party, we've got to kind of like think to ourselves a little bit, well, how does that glucose impacting us in our brain? You know, we can manage alcohol until we can't. Can we manage glucose until we can't? And are the symptoms of this insulin resistance and not being able to manage glucose anymore, are they manifested in different forms, like bipolar, like schizophrenia, like advanced depression? Oh, that's kind of like something to be curious about there. So children are born in a state of nutritional ketosis. So hold on, let's get this right. There was a study that was done, I think it was in about 850 women, and they measured ketones in the second and third trimester. And they were measuring the mother during the second, third trimester, and the mother was in a light ketotic state, about 0.4 was the mean. They measured the placenta at birth, and they measured the child. And the child at birth was in a mild ketotic state, 0.4. But the placenta was actually 2.95. There's a massive amount of ketones, 2.95 millimole in the placenta. Why is the placenta that's feeding, that's drip feeding ketones to the fetus? And that brain development is really important. Then actually a mother's milk, if you actually look at it, it is ketotic. And that child, if we're looking at brain development, is still going to grow. If that's the most important piece, breastfeeding for a period of time is also very important. So we kind of like take a look at that first year of our lives. The amniotic fluid is bathed in ketones, our GI tract is bathed in ketones, our pulmonary tract is bathed in ketones. And we move from having this intravenous drip of ketones, especially coming from the placenta, into what is now an episodic method when the baby is first born. It's now got an episodic, it's getting these feedings in episodes during its day. Why do children have, we all talk about these lovely chubby bubs. It's like, why do they have this layer of fat on them? Well, if they're not with the mother, or if in between the feedings, that baby can metabolize its bodily fat for energy and use ketones and glucose neogenesis at the same time. So it's got everything it needs for for survival, and survival even if something happens to the mother that can carry on for a longer period of time. And so this is our unique evolutionary key that helps us grow so well and become the dominant species in the world. And babies have a very high metabolic switch. Within an hour, they can easily shift in and out compared to what we are as adults. Because as we start eating glucose, we lose that metabolic flexibility. It starts to differ. And then it can take on sometimes into multiple days to get into nutritional ketosis. Now, for me, if ever I bump on out, I can actually get back into nutritional ketosis quite quickly. I just fast for a few more hours in that morning when it has happened. And usually within 2 to 3 hours, I'm back into nutritional ketosis really quite quickly. And I think that's what you get after a long period of time. You get this metabolic flexibility. So coming back to this little mental health thing and the impact that sugar and glucose has, the impact of glucose and glucosis, what can ketosis do for mental health? Well, before we come on into that little mental health aspect, I want to talk about what is the glucose ketone index. So this is originally came out by Professor Seefried at the University of Boston. And he showed the GKI is the ratio of your blood glucose in millimole divided by your beta hydroxybutyrate to give you a ratio number that came out. And he found that number to be really quite stable to use this. And in cancer, you're trying to drop down your glucose as much as possible and push up your ketones as high as possible. And so when we look at being in nutritional ketosis, we want to be under 9 for that. When we want to be in therapeutic ketosis, we want to be kind of like under 6, about 3.5 to 6. And when we're looking for that really heightened state of, for maybe a cancer treatment, the holy grail would be to get down under 1. But that's really difficult to actually do and might need, certainly would recommend having physician help. So this kind of like came out originally in the cancer area. But what we found that we've seen this GKI transition to neurology once we were able to bring the price down on strips, and we have been used in 89 different clinical trials. One of the clinical trials that we did was at the University of Edinburgh with Dr. Ian Campbell, and he saw a direct correlation on GKI to outcomes. And that this then becomes an important piece is when I'm talking to people about why they're doing a ketogenic diet, I always start at what is that person's why. The why for somebody for bipolar is going to be different to somebody who's just doing it for weight loss or type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes. And so it's really important. But now we were the first meter in the world that put GKI on the meter and in the app. We're now seeing this have applicants to other areas in that respect. And it's also, we're involved in clinical trials like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and epilepsy. So the use of a ketogenic diet for epilepsy has, that's been around for nearly a century in that way. And now we're seeing in schizophrenia that the decrease of the glucose transporter and increase of ketone body has making a profound difference. So you can take a look at this as how GKI being the biomarker for cancers and neurological diseases, and it kind of like reflects your metabolic state in a better way. You can kind of like look at the GKI number almost as a proxy for insulin, if you will. I think that would be a lovely next clinical trial for us to do, is to actually do a trial where we're looking at GKI and how it relates to insulin within the body, because right now there's not an affordable insulin test that can be done in the home. And I think where we can do that with the GKI is definitely an area that can make a great deal of difference. And obviously, as more of these clinical trials come on out, we'll see the difference. So nutritional ketosis, mental health, what can that do for the brain? Well, on this trial that was in France, we saw 28 patients, bipolar, major depression, and schizophrenia, and over 43% received clinical remission. So that's in the absence of glucosis, or reducing that down so that these individuals were in ketosis. We saw a 43% clinical remission. What can that do to somebody who does not have all that impairment that perhaps that they had from glucosis causing this thing? I mean, I think that can be a massive difference. 100% of those patients had improved symptoms. 96% had weight loss, and 64% were discharged and less medication. Think of the burden of that cost for society. So if we look at the benefits of ketosis, from weight loss, brain and heart functioning to be 25% more better, the effects of cognitive function, the improved stamina. We see people like Zach Bitter doing the Western States run and being able to run 100 miles fully in ketosis, or Dr. Ian Link being able to run 100 miles for over 5 days with zero food. The reduced inflammation, Dr. Stephen Finney at the Symposium for Metabolic Health showed that every single biomarker for inflammation goes down on a well-regulated ketogenic diet. And when asked by another doctor which of the biomarkers for inflammation should he choose, he said ketones. Because if somebody's in ketosis, their inflammation will be down. If you are in glucosis, your inflammation is going to be up. So which path do you want to measure? The path of glucose or the path of ketones? And this becomes really kind of like key. We have decreased risk for cancer. I mean, my wife is a 10-year cancer thriver. And we choose to be in a state of nutritious ketosis because we want to make sure that we have a prophylactic effect in that respect, that we want to make sure that our body has a great immune system, low inflammation. And so when that cancer does rise on up, and cancer will always come back, that we're ready to fight that, and it will not take hold. There are Dr. Nature Winters, she says, with cancer, it's not a case of if, it's about when. Maybe we're all living with cancers, but only if certain conditions allow, can they become prevalent. If you don't allow those conditions to become prevalent, can you actually live cancer-free? This is a good question. I think certainly more studies need to be done on that. We get the protection and lengthening of your telomeres for anti-aging. You don't have all of those reactive oxygen species. Actually, you can utilize less oxygen. You get an increase in antioxidants. You get the epigenetic gene expression where you're regulating or epigenetic or down-icing. You get increased ATP, and obviously ATP in the mitochondria. This is where the batteries, the energy within the body, and then you get increased BDNF, is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So there's a huge list of benefits that you can get from being in nutritional ketosis. And I like, there's a favorite thing. The military would say that it's a force multiplier. So when you are in ketosis, you are dual fueled. You're giving a whole smorgasbord, if you will, of energy substrates and signaling factors to your cell, and the cell can choose what works best for that. In my mind, I think it's the ultimate kind of like biohack that you can do with your body against any supplements. I was sorry to hear that for many years I had been supplementing with NAD. And I found out through Dr. Finney on his presentation as that naturally ketogenic diet will actually increase your NAD. So I didn't need to be paying out all those years for those supplements. I'm now not utilizing them, but so, hey, it's actually saved me money in that respect. And my question to people is, should you wait until you've got a metabolic damage? Should you wait until you've got an NCD to do nutritional ketosis? If it has all of those benefits, all of the things of those aspects that is there, I look at glucosis as actually being sort of like the non-default state, that when we eat carbohydrates, we short circuit our brain like that little young child. Now, we might be able to deal with that short circuit for a while, just like somebody drinking alcohol can sort of deal with alcohol until they become an alcoholic. So are these NCDs the symptoms of the underlying insulin resistancy that we build up over time? And should we wait until our 40s, until our bodies have been ravaged before we try it? And so I think the goal that will help, and this will be on a generational scale, and this is the goal of our 501c3 nonprofit public charity, the Ketogenic Foundation. Our goal is to change this mindset, but I think it's going to take generations, and it will only happen when one doctor dies and another doctor dies and another doctor dies, of these gatekeepers who are the old thought leaders. For Gemma and I, the question was what is our legacy? Is our legacy that we make a buck or we make a difference in this life? We finished our succession planning last year. And now when we pass away, everything goes to the foundation. And so for me, this is a case of like, I'm not here to sell a meter. I'm not here to make a buck. What I'm here to say is that there is a different way. And I think we lost our way along the line, and we can bring it back. Because if I've done my job correctly, you don't need a meter. You won't need these things because you'll just know how to live a good lifestyle. And that, I think, is the optimal way that we need to live. But we need to be teaching this at an earlier level. It needs to become part of curriculum. It needs to be taught in school and for the next generation of doctors because it's costing us too much. In this conversation, do you know how many people might have had an amputation because of the complications of diabetes? There's one every 2 minutes. So whilst we have been talking, roughly 30 people have had an amputation. Yep. And when people say, I don't eat carbs, I look at the results of those who do eat carbs. An amputation, you think a ketogenic diet is restrictive? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Being in a wheelchair, dialysis, that's restrictive. But the doctor won't ever tell you. What the doctor will tell you is, here, take this pill, And then we might stave off of this. They're never going to tell you what the long-term effects of what diabetes will actually do to the body. And the worst sacrilege is when the doctor is now giving an SGLT2 inhibitor like Ozempic or Wegovy, which is a glucose blocker. Hey, keep eating all the crap that you've had, but we'll try and change you from the inside to block glucose within your body. What are the ramifications of blocking all of that? That's huge. We've already seen the complications of those things. Whereas a good doctor will say, you know what, perhaps if we stop eating the glucose, then you give the moment for your body to recover. But why not start earlier?
Right. I am so, what piqued my interest at your talk at Hack Your Health. Everybody talks about how important ketones are for your brain. But when you mentioned your heart, that was like, because I get spells of tachycardia that I've had for years, and they've haven't totally gone away, but since starting keto, they've slowed down a lot. And Dr. Ovadia, I had caught him on a live stream, and he clearly answered somebody's question, and he says, everybody says how ketones are important for your brain, but nobody touches base that ketones are so important for your heart as well. And I'm like, that's awesome. So when you brought that up at Hack Your Health, it was like, all right, he needs to come on and really talk about this, because it's not talked about that much.
No, I think, and this heart health was actually going to be borne out. I think there's two great clinical trials. There's one clinical trial going on in OSU with Dr. Volek's lab in association with the Department of Defense on heart health for veterans, which is really important. I'm going to look forward to seeing that data coming out. But one that's already had data on it is the lean mass hyper-responder study that's done by David Feldman. And they actually did the intake on 100 long-term people on a ketogenic diet. So these people are long-term and lean mass hyper-responders, so they had super high cholesterol. Oh, well, that's supposed to give you a marker. If you've got high cholesterol, you're going to be heading for a cardiovascular risk massively. So these people, median age, I think was like 54. They'd been in ketosis for, I think, 4 to 5 years. And so they did the intake on these 100 people, and they looked at their calcium score, which is doing imaging of the heart, and you can see the calcium that comes in that calcium score. And then they cross-matched this, and they did a cohort study by age with all of these people to one of the leading heart studies. And at that age, about anywhere between, I think it was 8 to 10% of the people within that would have had a calcium score over 50. And so when they did the calcium score on all 100, not one was above 1. Long-term ketosis, not one was above 1. So already just there on the intake, they were doing better than what the national average was. We should have had, out of that 100 people, at least 8 to 10 with a score over 50, and there wasn't a single person with a score over 1. So you can kind of like yourself, how preventative is nutritional ketosis when it comes to heart health? How, if the heart muscle is wanting to consistently use a certain substrate over glucose, but you're just blunt forcing glucose all the time, here we look at it. And I think what we'll eventually see is we'll see the cholesterol demons go away, which will kill a statin business, $1 billion statin business. But there's going to be a great deal of people wanting to get into that. So we look at heart health, we look at mental health. We see all the inflammation markers that goes on there. We see stamina, muscle building. There's another great study that's been done even on anorexia. And people go like, oh, ketogenic diet, you're going to lose weight. So they're going to put people who already got anorexia, can put them on a ketogenic, are they going to lose weight? No, they don't. They actually put on weight. They put on muscle mass.
Muscle, that's right.
It's okay to lose fat mass. It's not okay to lose muscle. And then what you have is you've got a nutrient-dense food. And when you got nutrient density, you can have smaller portions. And then once you reduce the inflammation and that person is feeling better in their body because they're having their better mental health condition, then they get this satiety that is in there. then they can actually kind of come on out. I'm looking forward to seeing the results of the anorexia study, because then we can go back to oncologists, and with the oncologists, they can say, oh, I don't want you to lose weight because you've got cancer. It's okay to lose fat mass. It's not okay to lose muscle mass.
Right. You bring up the calcium scores and everybody that follows me, they know I've had 2 done. First one in 2022, after starting keto in 2020, my score was so extremely high. Now I battled high blood pressure all my life. I don't take medicine for it anymore. It's under control. My score was well over 5,000.
Wow.
And then I had one done a year later, and it went up to over 6,000. So I caught Dr. Avadia in another live stream, and he's the one that said repeat it in a year. And I did. And when I told him what the second score was, he said, well, typically as you age, your calcium score will increase 20%. Mine only increased 10%. So I'm like, okay, that's a win for me. I'm not having another one. It was way too stressful. I'm like, nope, I'm good.
Yeah.
But that was frightening. It was absolutely frightening.
But just remember, 1 year of being in nutritional ketosis, is that it took a long time to us to do the damage to the body. It's still going to take a while. Yeah. Do I wake up in the morning and I have a more elevated glucose? Yeah. I run in the 95s to up to 100s. Yeah, that's just me. And how often do I get into the 83s or into the 70s? I can only get there by prolonged fasting. And, I've just finished this. We did a 32-hour fast this week. But I like to bring fasting as a kind of like a reset for the body, because you get that autophagy and you get that apoptosis that comes on into play for those things. Because I still have the insulin resistancy. The insulin resistancy is still there within the body, and it takes a long time to even get rid of that, or that you can reduce down that insulin sensitivity, but at the end of the day, it's hard to repair the damage once the damage is done. So here you've got this more of the uphill battle. And to my mind, it's like, how do we get to the younger generation, the next generation? And it's so nice to see that the younger generation is a lot more into fitness. When I go to the biohackers conferences, I see a lot more younger people here that are saying, I don't think we want to repeat the sins of our previous generations. And I think this becomes far more interesting. I think the moment of success will be when I can get onto a United Airlines and order a ketogenic meal, because I can order halal, I can order kosher, I can order vegetarian, but as somebody who had pre-diabetes, I can't order a ketogenic diet. And if you order the diabetic meal, it's just so laden with carbs, it's unbelievable. It's like, I won't even eat that. I'll just take
when my husband was in the hospital, I told you backstage, he had ketoacidosis one time in his life. And when he was in the hospital, they're serving him all this garbage. And I'm like, and now if he has to have any kind of procedures done, and you know how they want to give you a snack to eat, I bring it with me. I was like, this is what he'll eat. He's not eating this stuff. That's it.
Yeah. And that is the challenge as we go forward. And that's what our foundation is for. And this is where Gemma and I look at a generational approach to it and a legacy approach to this. So
I definitely wish I would have known about ketosis and all that years ago, way long time ago.
Absolutely.
Because goodness, I don't think I'd be sitting where I'm at now.
Were there any questions that we wanted from the guests here, by the way?
I have been looking for questions. I did have a couple comments up here that I wanted to get to. Pa Beater, I don't know if that's what I'm supposed to say. Marathon runner ran 5 marathons in 5 days fasted.
Yes, I heard about this one, which is quite true. Well, if you look, if somebody with an average BMI has about 250 kilocalories on their body, which that's enough to easily run 250 miles in that respect. If you're running below your metabolic rate, And this becomes really important. If you're looking for super high speed, you're going to go over your metabolic rate. You're going to have this lactic acid. You're going to need to use the glycogen and the glucose. And this was where the old law of running came in, of carbohydrate loading, where they were like that. But if you can pull back a little bit, and this is what like Fast Freddy, the cyclist, does, and other long distance runners, is they try to work what their metabolic rate is and get that rate higher and higher and find where the edge of the envelope is for them. And so what we have with a lot of runners is they'll measure their ketones before the race, then they'll measure their ketones after the race. And then if there was still quite a lot of ketones left, they left something in the tank. And if you're using a watt meter or working on your pace, you can start to dial up your pace and work out where you bonk or where you don't bonk. And if you can keep below that, this is how we see a lot of elite athletes and competitors, they all train low carb, and they might just use carbohydrates on game day if they're looking to try and get a win. But I think it's very possible that you can do 5 marathons in 5 days, no problem at all. Look at the 0-500, that was zero food, 5 days, 100 miles by Dr. Ian Lake.
Wow.
So yeah.
Yeah, I have fasted. I have done 3-day fasts periodically.
Mm-hmm.
And getting past that initial hunger is probably the biggest part.
Yeah.
But after that, it was easy.
I think, once you build up your fasting muscles, it becomes a lot easier. I mean, day 1 is always the hardest for me. Day 2 is the easiest. Day 3 is not too bad. Day 4, I'm kind of like getting bored on it. Day 5, it's sort of like, hey, I'm sort of like done on this one here because I love the ceremony of food.
Right. That was doing my part for red meat. I never ate it as a child.
I think, here is one of the, I think, thank you for bringing up the red meat piece there, Evelyn. Holistic regenerative agriculture, for every kilogram of protein that is produced, we can harvest 3.5 kilograms, we can secure 3.5 kilograms of carbon and sequester it into the soil. If you go to a rangeland in, say, Colorado, what you see is a polyculture of flora and fauna and animals and raptors. There can be elk, possums, and there can be deer, there can be raccoons, there could be all sorts of numbers of invertebrates and all sorts of like different species that we have there in a holistic regenerative agriculture. Yet if we look at typical monoculture of organically produced carrots or avocados, where we're stripping the skin off the soil, replanting it every year, using high amounts of fossil fuels and nitrates that goes in it. But we say it's organic. Well, look at all the animals that were killed to just keep that monoculture going. There's thousands and thousands of invertebrates that are killed to do that with a combine harvester. But if you're eating red meat, one animal has one bad day, but millions of other animals have great days. And so this is, for me, I just want that animal to have express its pigginess or express its cowness and have a great life, and then just have one bad day, because I know that this is the optimum substrate for a human being is proteins and fats. I think it was, who was Lustig, wasn't it? Or Lundquist, I think it was. There are essential fats and proteins or you will die. There are no essential carbohydrates. Your body can produce all the carbohydrate it needs through glucose neogenesis. And this was proven that if we do that, we don't even get scurvy. This goes back, the ketogenic diet goes back over 100 years now. Over 640 publications were done last year on this. And if you kind of like look back, as I mentioned in history, this was the default status until we short-circuit ourselves. I think it's nice to see these meats. And by the way, chicken, I love chicken. Chicken backs are my favorite. That's kind of like where the best flavor is on that one. I'm not a breast
chicken backs, huh?
Yeah, chicken backs are the best. Yes, no need to buy NAD. I'm like, if you see Stephen Finney's Society of Metabolic Health Practitioner, actually, if you go to our website videos and Low Carb USA series, there's over 200 hours of videos there of all of the Low Carb USA events. We license that and then we give them away free so everybody can do a deep learning on it. His one I was showcasing on NAD saved me a significant amount of money on Elysium. So I'm glad you enjoyed that a little bit. And, for me, if a diet requires a lot of supplementation, like we see with with especially the vegan diet, trying to supplement and get all of that in. For me, potassium, magnesium, and salt, that's all you need. And we don't get the magnesium in the way that we used to get it in our water source and food sources from now. But so that's pretty much all I do. I think that's all you need on a well-regulated ketogenic diet. I know I should have more organ meat, and I'm bad at organ meat. So I kind of like have to, I know I had to kind of get a little bit of sort of like that, but we do use pluck as a seasoning. And I do have these epic liver and bites that I kind of like get them in. But I was never an organ meat guy. And I know
How about liverwurst? Does that do?
Oh, I can't do it. I didn't grow up with it.
I can do that.
No, but I tried bringing pâtés, chicken liver pâtés, or a good way of bringing in those things. We have in our burgers a mix of organ meats and burger meat. I think that's a good way of trying to bring them in on their own. I just have that, and that's my bias of my upbringing. We didn't do organ meats at all, and even though we had fresh food. We never went to a Mickey D's or pizzas or anything like that. I grew up very poor. My father was a sergeant in the Welsh Guards, and I left America with $750 in a backpack to England to come to America. So for me, it's it was a treat to go and have fast food, and we always had fresh food at home. And my grandmother was a great vegetable gardener. But now I see what the effects of candy and chocolate hobnobs and the rest of it has on society. And they know about the bliss point. They know how to market these things to like make you want more. Yes. So
get on board. Yeah.
You are quite true on that. And that's part of what we're trying to work with the foundation is to educate and train the next generation of doctors. And like I said, this is a generational thing and a generational game. It's going to take a long time to change the mindset. But when we see the number of papers that are coming out on this, that's huge. And I think as we change one doctor at a time, eventually they'll change all of their patients over the course of their lifetimes. And this eventually it will get to where that it's going to be a top down and this bottom up approach. But I'm not going to wait until the medical community has said and embraces it. That's why I'm doing it now. I can take control of myself. The need to cheat. Okay, this is a good one. The need to cheat. So Dr. Isabella Cooper at the University of the University of Westminster, she actually did a great paper on long-term ketosis in young, healthy women who weren't on birth control. And they actually put them into a period where they were, I think it was a 3-week, a month period where they were monitoring them in ketosis, but they'd already been long-term ketosis prior to that. Then they put them into I think it was 21-day, 4-week, maybe, a period of where they were eating to the English guidelines. So they were in a state of glucosis. And then they did another back washout period. And they showed what happened during that yes, all these bad biomarkers just went up during that, when they were in the state of glucosis, but they all quickly switched back down to it. So that means if you are long-term keto and you feel the need to cheat, you have a choice. And I think this is where exactly the great thing that you mentioned here. You have a choice to decide whether or not you do or do not want that. As somebody who was smoked up until from about the age of 13 to 23, I know one cigarette's not going to kill me, but the cumulative effects will. I also know that when I do have carbohydrates, and it does happen, especially when I'm traveling, when we were in France recently, and people they throw bread down there and you're dealing with the language barrier a little bit, and it's there in front of you and you're like, oh my God, it's hard to do that. Where here in the States, I can say, no, thank you. I don't want to have the bread. I can be pretty like that. French people don't understand when you say no bread.
Oh, let's face it. French bread is amazing.
It is, but I know the effect that it will have on you. But then, between my wife and I, if we're in an amazing restaurant and somebody puts down this handmade, a 2-star Michelin restaurant handmade thing, you know, one will eat it and try it, and we'll ask the question, is it worth it? Mm-hmm. And this is where you say here, you step back and think about your family members. Is it worth it? And that's what we're left with. And by testing, we know how quickly we can get back into ketosis or not. For somebody first starting, I will never recommend cheat days. Personally, I'm never going to cycle in or cycle out. I don't believe in carb cycling at all, because I know what my addiction level is. And carbohydrate addiction is very real there. You know, you say about that craving. Is craving addiction? Yeah. Your body wants to have that dopamine, that pleasure center to come on in there. So I think this is a great statement. Thank you. Yes, indeed. I think ketones are massively important. You know, we still haven't looked at the value of acetoacetate. Remember that 28% of the energy within the body is in acetoacetate. It's a very volatile compound and quickly gets shunted into beta hydroxybutyrate, which represents about 70% of the energy in the body. About 1 to 2% is in acetone. But this interplay of acetoacetate in the Krebs cycle, along with ketones, becomes important. What Dr. Mary Newport did and showcased in her little book on ketones was that if she could get higher acetoacetate in her husband, he was getting better symptom relief from his Alzheimer's. And so here we kind of like need to look at the interplay of acetoacetate, but still more studies need to be done on this. And when there's no money in this, and remember, there's no magic pill here, there's no billion-dollar pill, it makes it really hard for us to find the funding to fund these studies that need to showcase it. So if it is our preferred fuel, it makes sense that it's best for us. And that's why I've been in nutritional ketosis since 2015.
That's just awesome. Lynn, she's a lean mass hyper responder and eating this way 7 years with elevated number CAC score remains 0.
Perfect. High, you've got massively high cholesterol. You're supposed to be on death's door. You're about to have a heart attack any day now, and you're 0. You have 0 risk. And I think this is where I think the lean mass hyper responder study is going to put the nail in the coffin of statins. And then I think when we see the studies that's done on cardiovascular stuff that Filaverde is doing and others, you know, we can kind of like put to rest the heart risk that is on there, because all of these studies are not evidence-based. They've been epidemiological. And so they're just trying to correlate to. And so I think a proper clinical trial is to actually showcase whether or not that person was or was not in it, that they're. Yeah, slow pace, keeping underneath his metabolic age.
For you.
Mm-hmm.
What about those who do not get into ketosis deeply? Her highest, this is my sister, was 1.2. Is that enough, or what strategies to go higher?
Okay, first of all, with that, the question is what is the person's why? Why do they want higher numbers? Is this for mental health? I'm personally between 1.1 and 1.7 on my ketones and can manage in there. So what are my strategies to do that? Well, I certainly increase a lot more fat into my diet. This is done in my tea. I'm okay. I can drink tea, and I utilize heavy cream within that tea. So to drinking of tea during the days, I'm pushing up the amount of fat in my diet, and I do more moderate protein. I'm not doing too much protein. This is where we find in the carnivores that too much protein actually is glycogen in meat itself. And we see carnivores having slightly lower background, 0.3, 0.4s, and 0.5s. And there's nothing wrong with that, to be honest with you. But if you're doing it for mental health reasons, like I was, because I was on antidepressants, I found that symptom release, that my zone was between 1.1 and 1.7. So strategies to get that higher is increasing the amount of fat that's within the diet, for sure. Adding in intermittent fasting can certainly kind of like kickstart this a little bit to be a little bit better there. Being moderate on your protein. I think those are kind of like the strategies. In children, it's a lot easier to do it than adults because of our body mass, but those are kind of like the key areas of what you would want to achieve on that. My fast recently, I was up to 3.5, I think it was, on my ketones, but that was because I was on a 32 fast with a blood glucose of about 70.
Yeah, mine get up there when I'm fasting, up to 3 point something, 4 point something.
Yeah, but always come back to the person's why.
Like, woo.
Yeah, don't go chasing ketones, chase results. And so the question is, what is the result that you're looking to to achieve that is on that.
Deb is pretty healthy. Like I said, this is my sister.
Okay.
I think she's seen my ketones go pretty high sometimes. And but she doesn't do the fasting like I do either.
Well, Deb, it's good to see you, to join us. We've been going about an hour and 20 minutes, so I don't want to take too much of people's time. Organ meat is an oxymoron.
Either an organ or a meat.
Yeah.
Everybody's saying hi. Now, I have a question for you. And it's in my list that I was sent. Just reminders. The Keto Mojo website, what else is there to offer other than selling a meter?
Oh, there's huge amounts. In fact, we actually moved the selling part to the side and just go to the top right and click on shop. But if you take a look at the website itself, we've got how-to guides. We've got the 7 steps to success. We've got ketone testing basics. There's the blog area and research area that we have on it that shows all the recent research that's going on. We have recipes, over 220 different recipes that were done by our chef for you to choose from, to show how delightful and beautiful a ketogenic food can be. It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. With the video section, we have over 200 hours of videos from all the low carb USA things, and so there's a massive amount. You can go into a bit of a rabbit warren, I'm afraid, which we're trying to simplify it a little bit because there's so much information that is on there.
Right. And there are also success stories on there.
Yep, we have success stories of people who have tried it through different ways. We also have a little bit, each time a new clinical trial comes out, we have information on that clinical trial. So depending on what the person's why, they can find that information, and all of it's for free. So we don't charge for any of that part that is on that. And even if you're not using our product, you can still get all of that information. If you sign up for the promo bundle, you get a free 104-page guide that comes along with it online. And we will give Cindy a discount code at the end of this too, that we can share with our whole audience.
You saw that pop up, did you? Any thoughts on my inability to get above 1.1, even fasted for 48 hours? Been clean carnivore 11 months, lost almost 200 pounds. Wow. Right. Trying to get some autophagy.
Yeah, I mean, are you clean? I don't know this. Are you clean keto prior to doing your fast is one thing, because I've seen people who aren't clean keto and they're having carbohydrates, and they're wondering why they don't get these higher numbers.
Well, he's saying he's clean carnivore.
Okay, clean carnivore. So 48 hours, I was never a high responder. 1.1 is really, really, really good. I would keep coming back to these fasts, including them in reducing down your insulin sensitivity. I can sometimes, I use mackerels in oil as what I call my fasting crutch. Like if I'm trying to get to the next set of hours, I'll actually eat a tiny amount of that in oil, and that added fat kind of like helps me kind of like start to push that up and crank the metabolism a little bit more. Like I said, we did a 32-hour one just the other day, and I personally was able to get to 3.5. But also on this piece, and it's really important to remember, that what we measure is what's in the tank, not of how good your liver is at creating ketones, nor how efficient your body is at creating them. Are you getting the results at the 1.1? And again, why are you doing it? Is this mental health? Is it a different reason? Getting 1.1 is absolutely fine. 0.5, 0.6, that's pretty fine. It just depends if you're trying to push for a mental health reason or a cancer treatment, and then it's a case of high caloric restriction for a longer period of time, and increasing the amount of MCTs within the body and fat within the body is what can push those up, and reducing down protein to a moderate amount in that respect. Because some people who have certain genetic SNPs aren't predisposed to having too much fat. They won't get the higher numbers. And so that's why Dr. Finney and others advocate for what they call a well-regulated ketogenic diet, is adequate fat, moderate protein, and above ground vegetables. But that's sort of like type 2 diabetes reversal.
Right.
Yeah.
She talks about the percentage off
We
code. Thank you very
we'll
much.
get that. It'll be afterwards. I have to go to another meeting after this,
Right.
but we will give it back, and then it can go out to everybody within Cindy's group.
Okay, Deb answered you. Thank you for the answer. I intermittent fast most days, some 36 hours. Mental health is not an issue, so I guess I'm good.
Yeah. You're
The
trying,
one point
if this wasn't for cancer and this wasn't for mental health reason,
No.
you're doing great. Do not sweat it. I wouldn't sweat it. Just being in ketosis is the better way to be.
This is Arden. He's saying hi and thanks for the ideas, he says.
So I want to thank everybody for tuning in.
Yes.
I do unfortunately have to go to another meeting. I would like to stay and chat a little bit longer, but on this particular occasion, thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you, Cindy.
Well, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And everybody that's showed up in the chat. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you spending your Fridays with me. And Lynn is telling us thank you. And Dorian, again, thank you so much. I know you are one busy man. You're telling me your schedule backstage. Whoo, wore me out just listening.
Okay. Thank you so much, Cindy.
Anyway, everybody have a good night.
Take care. Good night. All righty.